welcome. We're back. It's Words with Friends, and this time I'm here with Drew Tarvin. And hi, Drew.
Hello. It's good to be here. I'm excited.
See, Drew is a friend of mine, and I was wondering, why on earth I picked you to talk about funny, because you're not even funny.
I know, man. That is what a weird kind of choice to make, but I think that it actually works out well because at least I didn't used to be funny. But I've learned to be funny, and maybe that's partly the value is I'm someone who has had to learn it, so maybe I can teach other people a little bit about what it means to be funny. Maybe. Or maybe you just want it to be ironic. I don't know.
Oh, who knows, right? And it's funny that you say that it's weird that I picked on you to be funny. It's funny that sometimes funny and weird are confused as the same thing.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny how it's weird, and it's weird that it's funny.
So, okay, tell me what's meant by the word funny to you. Like, what does it mean?
Well, I mean, from a background in comedy, funny is kind of very clearly defined as whether or not something makes you laugh.
Is that it?
That's the distinction. Yeah. If something makes you laugh, it is funny. If it doesn't make you laugh, it's not funny.
Okay. So it's something that makes you laugh. Now, there are thousands of things that make you laugh. What are some of the things that are proven to be examples of things that make you laugh?
Well, I mean, from a intentional standpoint, of course, there is like punchlines, jokes, right, with a setup and punchline. There are stories, and sometimes we laugh at stories. But in fact, when it comes to day-to-day conversation, usually laughter doesn't follow a joke. It follows an awkward moment or an interaction between people, or maybe sometimes just a way that someone looks at you. So there's a lot that we as humans find is funny, and it's interesting because there's not a lot of theories that there are a couple of theories, actually. There are a lot of theories, but there's no kind of like exactly known reason why we as humans laugh, and that's what makes it so interesting.
Okay. That must cause you some trouble, right? Is the fact that you can't scientifically prove what it is, because you're an engineer at heart, right?
I am certainly an engineer, but I think the interesting thing is that we don't necessarily have to know why we as humans laugh as a whole to be able to learn how to make people laugh. We don't have to understand what makes something funny in order to be funny in a way.
Okay. Why is laughter important though? What's the point?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that most people think of it as a nice to have. Right? No one dislikes laughter as far as I know. No one hates, feeling joy in their body, right? But there are benefits to it in a number of regards. There's the physiological benefits of it. So if you think of laughter increasing blood flow to the body and increasing kind of oxygen in the lungs and helping to reduce stress and relax muscle tension and burn calories and all that stuff. So there's the scientific benefits of it. And then there's also the social benefits of it as well. Like when you laugh with people, there's kind of a camaraderie that goes on that says, oh, okay, we both find this funny. We find this interesting, and we have a connection through a smile or through laughter.
Okay. Now, you're a funny guy.
Try to be.
So how do you try to be funny?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a couple of different ways. So I do it intentionally in my programs, and I do it in stand-up comedy and improv comedy as well. By making jokes is one of the ways, but that's only one of very many ways that we can be funny. And when it comes to a practical application of it, we don't actually have to learn to try to be funny. We can be more spontaneous, more thinking on our feet, and use principles of improvisation as a way to make people laugh without necessarily going for a punchline.
Okay. Tell me some more about that.
Yeah, so the fundamental mindset of improvisation is something called yes and. It is how we as improvisers get on stage and make things up off the top of our head and make it seem like it makes sense. And so, if you and I do an improv scene and I'm like, oh my God, there's like a dog right there. You could be like, yes, but it's really just a rock. And then that's maybe funny for a brief moment, but then you and I are arguing about something that doesn't actually exist, right? It's an improv scene, we're making it up. That's very different than if we're doing an improv scene and you're like, oh my God, there's a dog over there. And I'm like, yes, and there's a monkey riding on it. Right? Oh. Now we get to see the scene about a monkey riding a dog and what that means to these two people. So as a mindset, it's just about building off of each other. But the application to creating humor is there's a couple of them. One, it's how we generate ideas. So if you get together with friends and they make a joke, you can yes and that joke and further it so that you're not just laughing, right? You're adding to the comedy. And then two, within comedy, there's this idea of, if this is true, what else is true? Right? It's a concept to explore something further. So for example, I'll sometimes share that it took me going to the state of Florida to realize that the rapper Flo Rida got his name from his home state of Florida, and he put a space in it. Right? And
That's funny. That's funny.
It blew my mind, right? When I learned that. And so if this is true, what else is true says that we could extend that further. And so we could say, all right, well, if Flow Rider did it, other places could do it as well. Like, I feel like there should be a Hispanic travel agency in Dover called De La Ware. Or, there could be a female internet detective who's married in Biloxi that goes by Mrs. IPPI.
I see.
This is true, what else is true? It's a way for us to build comedic ideas.
And for the benefit of anybody who maybe missed the joke, because that happens sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. You're talking about Mississippi and Delaware, right?
Yep,
just for the avoidance of any doubt there whatsoever.
Exactly. In case we have people that are not familiar with the states in the U.S., so they're like, "What are you talking about?" There's the application. That's the intersection of these kind of two incongruous ideas coming together, which is a lot of times what can help us to create laughter.
Okay. But what happens like when we miss like that though? I think, great, I want to be more funny. Great, being funny has some benefits, but we live so much in this fear of missing, or this fear that if I'm a funny guy, quote unquote, that you're like a joker. And if you're a joker, you can't be taken seriously. Like, what's the deal with all of that?
Yeah, well, it's just a misconception, because they have done a number of studies that they have found, one, leaders who use humor are seen as being more on top of things and in control than people who are not. They have found that executives who use more humor are paid more, and it was positively correlated, so that the more humor an executive used, the more they were paid when they checked in on things later. It's because we can use humor, because humor is a human element. Right, it's how we can be more effective with other people, and that's why, as an engineer, I care about it. It's an invaluable tool. It can improve our communication skills. We can use it to get people to kind of pay attention to what we're talking about. There's a great quotation that says that at the end of laughter is the height of listening. Right, if you get people laughing, then you can kind of tell them something afterwards. We can use humor to build relationships. Like I said, when we have positive shared experiences with people, we become closer together, and laughter is a great positive shared experience. We can use it to improve problem solving. Students who watched a funny comedy video 30 minutes before trying to solve a problem, they are 4 times more likely to be able to solve that problem. We can use it for our own productivity and managing stress and leadership. There's so many different applications to it. Like, it's the number one thing that people look for in a significant other, is, they say, sense of humor.
Right.
So and being funny can make you seem more attractive. They've done studies where people who are seen as humorous are seen as more attractive. So, whether it's work or life, there's tremendous benefits to being funny.
And you prove so many of those things to be true, right?
Yeah, most of them. I don't know.
Okay. So what's the funniest thing you've ever read about yourself, or you've heard that's been said about you?
Funniest thing. Well, I will say that I'm a big fan of like understanding like who people think I look like in terms of like celebrity doppelganger.
Right.
And so, I used to joke that I look kind of like a skinny Hugh Jackman. And then someone told me that I kind of look like the intersection of Hugh Jackman and Conan O'Brien.
Okay.
Like that. But my favorite thing that someone's told me about me is that they said that I look like Justin Timberlake, but from here to here. So
that's pretty funny.
But just here, and she even did this motion after this event. She came up to me and did this whole thing, and so I'm like, I don't know. That to me is hilarious that I've heard about me, right?
Yeah, it's kind of fun things, and I'm thinking on that. Like, what does it make you think at a later point in life if somebody says you look like Hugh Jackman?
Well, I mean, one, I would be, if I actually worked out, maybe I'd be like a famous movie star.
Right.
Because that's the other thing is when people have told me skinny Hugh Jackman, they've like sometimes emphasized the word skinny.
Right.
You're like, you're not Wolverine Hugh Jackman. No, you're far from that. You're skinny Hugh Jackman, which certainly I know I'm skinny. I've always been skinny. I was born 8.3 pounds and then stayed that way till I was 15 years old. Right?
So,
that's a joke. That's a little exaggeration there for an example of what's maybe attempting to be funny.
Okay. And it doesn't always work out though, right? I mean, you've done the world of comedy. You've tried making joke after joke after joke on stage. I mean, you and I have even attempted stand up together where you've tried to teach me and you've seen me fall on my sword quite embarrassingly. So like, how do you get over that though? Because you have to mess some stuff up here, surely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like so like humor is a skill, right? Being able to make people laugh is a skill, which means that it can be learned. But two, the way that we learn any new skill is through practice and repetition, right? Just like when you're first learning how to walk, you got up, you tried to walk, you fell down. And so then you got up again and you tried to walk again and like you learned. And I think sometimes as adults, we forget that learning process happens. And just imagine if you gave up on walking after the first time you ever fell, we'd all be like crawling around still, right? Be terribly inefficient. So humor is the same way, where we get up and we maybe try some humor, we try some things that don't ultimately work out all that well, but we learn from the process. Like one of the things that I've learned as an improviser is that failure is just data.
Okay.
Right? It says that, hey, the way that you did it that time did not work. So maybe when it comes to comedy, maybe I need to change. Like, for example, in comedy, one of the things is structure is important, right? You want to end on a punchline. So there's I think it's a Mel Brooks quote that goes, happiness is having a caring, close-knit, tight family that lives in another city. Right? Great punchline, great observation. If that quotation was, happiness is having a family that lives in another city that is tight, caring, close-knit, right? It's not as funny because it needs to have a setup and punchline. And so sometimes, maybe a joke or an idea is funny, but it needs to be restructured so that it has a clear setup and a clear punchline for the audience to know when to laugh. And so that you learn through the practice and repetition.
Okay. So if I want to be funnier, I'm guessing that I should probably try and find some safe places to start. Like I'm assuming a first date is not a great place. Maybe a funeral's not a great place. Or perhaps even like just launching into your day at work tomorrow, going, aha, this is the new me. And today I'm going to be funny me. Like, so where do you start this thing if you want to try and insert a little more humor into your life?
Well, I think that one, if the goal is so funny is certainly a very important piece, right? We'll say that comedy is about creating things that are funny.
Okay.
Right? We can expand the definition. We can then say humor includes comedy, but humor is also other things that are just maybe amusing, something a little bit silly or something a little bit different that maybe it's not creating laughter, but it's creating a smile.
Okay.
And so sometimes by first starting to let me be a little bit more humorous in day-to-day conversations and stuff like that, maybe that's a good starting point. But then two, if you do want to learn the skill of funny, I do think like that accurate, like you said, of learning it in a safe space. I think that stand-up is a great thing for everyone to try because that is the hardest form of public speaking you'll ever do, which is why you got to go. Right? If you can be funny in a stand-up crowd, you can be funny in a lot of other places, right? If you're learning that skill. An improv class is a fantastic way to learn because improv isn't about learning how to be funny. Improv is more practical application where it's learning how to react honestly in the moment. And that's what a lot of humor is. That's what conversational humor is. It's not about coming up with a great pun or a one-liner. It is about reacting honestly in a moment, having a heightened reaction or emotion to something. And you can learn that in an improv class. And then I think the other thing that you can be aware of is I think that a lot of people are funnier than they give themselves credit for. And so when you're wanting to learn to be funnier, one thing that you can do is just kind of be more attuned to when you make people laugh and kind of check in, okay, I just made people laugh in this conversation when I'm out having drinks with friends. What was it that made them laugh? And then you can start to learn a little bit more about the process.
Gotcha. And one of the things that I learned the hard way really was, particularly through speaking, you'd say something that would be funny and your natural reaction is sometimes to want to continue the conversation and talk past it. That sometimes a laugh from others can be unnerving. It can be unnatural. You're unsure like where to go next, or you want to plow on. I learned to kind of allow the laugh to happen. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? What's that all about?
No, it's a great thing. So there's something within comedy with this idea that's called, you don't want to step on your laughter, because laughter is part of a conversation, right? So if you think about it in a stand-up comedy club or even in a conversation, we laugh as part of a response. So if you say something funny, I start laughing. If you keep talking while I start to laugh, I'm going to stop laughing because I want to hear what you say. right? It's part of a contribution to the conversation. And so as a performer or someone making people laugh, you want to allow the laughter to kind of run its course. So because if I say a joke and right as you're getting ready to start laughing, I go into the next thing, people won't laugh because they're like, oh, I don't want to miss this. And so you want to allow people to have that laughter, because other things is like some people will get it very, very quick. So like I love wordplay and one-liners. And so some of my jokes, like the flow rider thing, you have to know the states, like it takes maybe a half a second to get that. If I just move on to the next thing, it's not allowing people a long enough time to actually register that something funny was actually said, and therefore that they're going to laugh at it.
Okay. So if I'm watching like a comedian deliver a show, or, you know, certainly like a Netflix special, something big that is produced, how much work do you think has gone into that 45-minute, that 60-minute set for that to look as effortless as it does?
A tremendous amount of work. It's hard to estimate because every person is different, but within comedy, we say there's kind of this rule of 90, which most people kind of suggest that 90% of what you write is going to be crap, right? Only 10% of what you write comedically is going to kind of fit within that wheelhouse of really what is really, really good. And so if you think about an hour-long special, then that means that maybe they've created as much as 10 hours worth of content to then whittle down and figure out what's good and work on and refine and all that. And as you get better and better, you might get a little bit closer to that. But even Seinfeld or even Ellen or even, you know, some of these top comedians, they are going to have what's their best 10% versus the remaining 90%. So it is a lot of practice and repetition that comes from it. And a lot of times people are kind of intimidated by that. But the reality is a lot of times you're getting that practice and reps anyway, where if you're thinking about adding humor to how you, like, say, when someone asks you, what do you do? You're going to constantly be working on that. So you might as well tweak it a little bit and see if there's ways that you ultimately get laughter in it.
Right. Okay. One of the things I observe about humor and being funny sometimes is this need for other people to be funnier. Like it's a competition, right? That there's levels of funniness. And you must have come across this. I've always been intrigued and meant to ask you other times, really, is in the comedy world, what do comedians think when the guy in the audience decides that he or she wants to be funnier than the person on stage? And you can give me your opinion and some of the opinions you've collected of others. I think it'd be great.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, so the idea of heckling or crowd interaction, it depends on whether you want it or not. But the truth is that most comedians, once they've become established, they recognize that they have all the power in the room. Right? They're the one with the microphone. They're the one with years of experience doing it. So very rarely will someone in the audience actually be funnier than the person on stage. It almost never happens, right? And oftentimes, the only time that people have the courage to do that is usually when they've been getting a little bit of liquid courage.
Right.
In which case, they're not going to have their full wits about them and they're not going to do well. Some people have the angle where, you know, you just ignore it and they'll go away. Right? You don't give the attention seeker any attention. Some people will be like, you know, Seinfeld's whole thing is like, what compelled this person to yell out? What's going on wrong in their life that they need to do it, right? That they need to yell out. So he'll do it as more of a conversational. Some people kind of goad the person into talking a little bit more. Because the other thing is, because of the power that a comedian has in the room with the microphone, is they can't respond too aggressively because they don't want the entire audience to turn on them as a comedian. They need to make sure that the audience is on board with, hey, we all don't want this guy talking. So then let's now, once we're all in agreement on that, now let me destroy this person with comedic ability. But the reality is, I mean, I think a lot of people think about it from the standpoint is that people paid money or they're giving their time to see this comedian perform, not for this person in the audience to get up there and shout things. Now, different people have different styles. So like Jimmy Carr in the UK, he wants people to yell things out because part of his show is how quickly he's able to respond to people. But it all depends on the individual comedian. For me personally, I have points of interaction intentionally in my show to talk with people so that I can riff and that we can have fun together, and I try to keep it positive and inclusive. But if I'm in the middle of kind of setting something up, it's like, I would like for you to be quiet so that I can execute this thing that I know will, at least I know based on previous shows, has gone well, so that we can entertain the audience and give them what they hopefully came for.
So what you really said is like, get out of my way, please, because I'm going this way.
Yep.
Okay. In the world of comedy, I've always been intrigued about this situation that you can decide something's going to be funny ahead of time. Like I've seen a lot of great comedians who did one run of shows and they were hilarious and brilliant. And then I see them do repeat performance after repeat performance after repeat performance of later acts that maybe to my degree don't have the same level of humor attached to them. But I hear people laughing at the very first thing that comes out of these people's mouths. Like I'm bemused and baffled by that, is that it almost tells me that we are in control of our own ability to find laughter more so than it be triggered by other people through deciding something's funny ahead of time. Is there anything in that, or am I just crazy?
No, I mean, I think that part of it is, yeah, there's in a sense a choice about humor, right? Is a choice of, like, there's some things that are just so funny that, you know, sometimes it happens in an inappropriate moment where like you just can't stop laughing. And you don't want to, but you can't just because something tickles you in a certain way. And then there are also there's the other end of the spectrum where it's like if a kid, you know, if your little niece or nephew comes up and they want to tell you a joke that they read from a joke book or that they learned from school, and it's, you know, one of my favorite kids' jokes of like, why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7, 8, 9, right? Then you start to laugh a little bit where it's like, is it the best joke in the world? No, but maybe you're laughing about the experience of a little kid and you want to give that positive feedback and reinforcement. I think that's certainly part of it. I also think that part of it is like, if you watch a Comedy Central special, it's like they get tremendous amounts of laughs and they get a lot of applause breaks where it's like, that joke was not worthy of an applause break. It's just that as a Comedy Central, presentation, people are amped up to like laugh more than they normally would. And they're encouraged to like applaud and like be over enthusiastic about kind of how they feel about something. So I do think that there's a little bit of a choice to that perspective. And that's why, you know, when you find a comedian that you absolutely love, even if their material like later isn't as good, like you're talking about, maybe you're going to laugh because you like their persona, right? Because it's not always that we're laughing at a specific setup and punch. I know like for a lot of times people laugh at me, like, so I do a bit where I do math pickup lines. And I know that half of the audience is laughing because they remember basic trigonometry and understand the joke. And then the other half is laughing at me being a nerd and attempting pickup lines in a bar setting, right? And so there's multiple reasons why people might laugh, and part of it might be you might be endeared to that person and want to give them the benefit of the doubt.
So let's go with some of these math pickup lines. Like, help me understand them, because I've heard you do these before, and they're great. So you can't keep them to yourself.
Right, yeah. So math pickup lines. So the context of this, the setup for this kind of joke is that women or men, people want to date someone who is confident, right? And what they don't tell you though is that they want that confidence to be in certain areas. Like no one wants to date someone who is confident in math. Right? But that's what I got. I'm confident. So the setting is a bar, right? I see a beautiful woman. My friends are like, you should go and talk to her. I'm like, I can't. They're like, just be confident. So I'm like, all right, if I'm going to be confident, I'm confident in math. So I'm going to try a math pickup line. So I go up to her and I'm like, hey girl, are you opposite over hypotenuse? Because you're making me want to sin. Like, what did you just say? So I'm like, all right, hey girl, are you a vertical asymptote? Because your beauty has no limits.
Well, boom.
It's like, you should probably leave. Hey girl, you're way above average. Don't be mean.
Oh,
yeah, right.
See, that one took a second, right? Took a second to catch that one.
A second, like, I've heard you mean, right? So all of those. So like, yeah, opposite over hypotenuse is how you calculate sine. Vertical asymptote, you know, things actually approach unlimit or no limits at all. And so then the joke comes from, do you actually remember it? So the people that remember vertical asymptotes are like, oh, okay, beauty has no limits. I get the connection. Other people are just like, who would ever say vertical asymptotes in an attempt at a pickup line? We're laughing at him being a nerd in this setting. Right.
So you're trying to take everybody with you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So you want to, I mean, as a comedian, you certainly want to do that, right? The bar for being funny in a stand-up comedy club is the highest bar that there is, right? If you're trying to be funny in day-to-day conversation, if you're trying to do it, whether it is to build rapport with, you know, someone at the grocery store or to use it as a leader, the bar is much, much lower in terms of what it is that you need to do. But from a comedian's perspective, yeah, you want to build, you want it to be very funny and you want to try to bring as much of the audience with you. That being said, I will say that as a speaker, there are certain jokes that I do that sometimes are just for me, or sometimes for one person in the audience. Like my recent TEDx talk that I did, TEDx talk, and sometimes my speaking engagements that I do, I say that humor is like the salt of a meal, right? Like you wouldn't eat an entire meal of salt because that would make you a horse. Do you want to be a horse? I say nay.
Boom.
Ba-boom, right? And so when I do that in a speaking engagement, like oftentimes like one person will laugh, right? And so then I'll make the joke to the audience to be like, that joke is just for me and that one other person, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be for everyone, it's for me. Sometimes no one will laugh and I'll say that joke is just for me. I don't know why. I love it. It's a dumb joke. I love it. And so I do it. I incorporate that type of humor into my presentations because it makes me laugh, right?
So which is a good enough reason, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Because if you are having fun with what you do, if you're being passionate, and you know this from the speaking side of like, if you show that passion for what you're doing and you have a good time, the audience is more likely to be passionate about it and have a good time as well. Because if you think about the flip side of it, if you barely care about what it is that you're talking about, or if you're bored by what you're talking about, the audience is going to be bored as well.
So how does Andrew Tarvin find his love for funny?
How did I find it?
Yeah.
I stumbled into it. I mean, I always enjoyed humor. I remember reading Calvin and Hobbes growing up and The Far Side. Like I loved comic strips in that way. But for me, actually becoming funny was my best friend in university wanted to start an improv comedy group and he needed people and forced me to join. And we were terrible. At first, we watched Whose Line Is It Anyway and tried to repeat what we saw. We had no idea what we were doing, but over time, with practice and repetition, we got better. And from improv, a bunch of us that did improv in university, about a year after doing that, we're like, well, there's a stand-up comedy competition. We're like, if we can make people laugh when we're making it up at the top of our heads, we've got to be able to make people laugh when we do stand-up. And it turns out that stand-up is much harder than improv, at least for me. But I fell in love with it because I got on stage and I got people to laugh based on things that I thought of. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really cool. I want to do this more. There's something addicting about making people laugh. And so it became this obsession of mine to do it more and more. And then I found out later that humor is effective with humans, right? And the engineer got really excited by the fact that humor and being funny actually improves your ability to get work done and to build relationships with people in X, Y, and Z. So then it was like, oh, that's a beautiful marriage. Not only is it fun to do, but also really exciting, and it actually gets better results. I'm sold.
Winner. So what are some steps I could take? I want to be funnier. What can I do?
Well, I think that one is you can do research, right? Some of the best research you ever do is to watch more things that are comedic. I do think that we learn through osmosis in a sense, where if you start to watch Netflix specials, so you and I have talked about James's, was it James? What's the guy's name?
James Acaster.
Yeah, James Acaster. That is a phenomenal bit. Neil Brennan's Three Mics is great. Hassan Minaj's recent special is so good. Like, there's so many great specials on Netflix that you can watch. You can go back and watch some of the older ones as well, right? And by watching it, just kind of have a slight eye to like, okay, why am I laughing now? What is it about this joke or this story or this way that this is being performed that I'm laughing? And so you start to learn that way through osmosis. I think certainly taking an improv class, you get practice and reps of doing it in a very safe environment, or trying stand up, you'll learn a little bit more about it. But then, like I said earlier, just have a kind of a little bit of an ear out to what makes you laugh day to day in a conversation, or what you say that makes other people laugh. Because if you're telling people like a story and they laugh at the story, then you can be like, oh, okay, when I tell the story this way, people laugh. And so then the next time you tell that story, tell it that way and maybe add a little bit more to it, add a little bit of exaggeration or something like that there, and be like, if it works better, great, keep it. If it doesn't, then try something different the next time. So I think those are all different ways to do it. And then certainly, part of what I'm trying to create for people is the opportunity for them to get funnier. Right. To give them resources so that they can try things out, so that they can learn about, because there's like certain kind of, we'll say, shortcuts or tools that comedians use, things like incongruity, right? Simply saying something a little bit different is a way to create humor, right? So in my programs, instead of saying, oh, we're going to take a 5-minute break, I'll say we're going to take a 300-second break. It's not always it's not hilarious, but it is something different that gets people to pay attention. And so there's certain shortcuts and things that we can learn that people can kind of pick up on and stuff. But the big thing is just to get out there and try things, to see what makes you laugh, to try it a little bit more. And what I encourage, at least for my corporate clients, is to think about 1 smile per hour. Right?
Okay.
How can you think of one thing that you do each hour that will make you smile? Whether that is watching a comedic, quick 5-minute video as a way to relieve stress, or maybe it's reading your emails in a different accent in your head so that you don't get bored while reading your email. Maybe it's including a joke or a punchline at the end of an email, or for me, I tweet out a pun or wordplay every single day just as a way to keep myself fresh. Think of one thing you can do each hour to create more levity in your life, and some of that will create humor, and it'll create a habit.
I love your puns though as well. I'm saying, anybody else that's kind of fly on the wall on our conversation right now, you got to tune into Drew's Twitter. He's just I'd say 7 out of 10 of them are great.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is the other 3 out of the 10 I've got to learn. I've got to learn the ones that are good and the ones that aren't, and they can't all be winners.
You taught me something about the idea of a comic triple, and then you taught me something about 9. I remember something about hitting something 9 times. Just those 2 rules stuck out for me, and things that I've tried to do more of. Just to help unpack those rules a little, see if anybody else can benefit from them in the same way that I have.
Yeah, for sure. So those are other examples of tools or shortcuts. And I think those are the things that can help people get started. So a comic triple is a very kind of common way to create a joke. And it's based off of the premise that you've heard the rule of 3 a lot, right? Because the 3 is a minimum number to create a pattern, right? Because the first thing exists, then you hear it a second time, and you're like, okay, that maybe is a pattern. And then you hear something a third time, and it establishes something is a pattern, right? So it's a minimum number to create a pattern. You can use a comic triple as a way to break that. So for example, I'll sometimes joke that as an engineer, I've always been an engineer. As a kid, I used to take things apart and then put them back together again, things like clocks and radios and my parents' marriage. And so that's a comic triple where the first 2 things are set up a normal list. So it creates an expectation in the audience. And then the third thing is something different from that list. Right. And so that means it makes people laugh because it's breaking that expectation. And so anytime you're writing out a list, whether it's in your biography or in an email or something like that, it could be an opportunity for a comic triple because you've created the first 2 things, and now you can just think of something that's a little bit outside the norm. So for example, in my bio, I mentioned groups that I've worked with include Microsoft, ESPN, and the International Association of Canine Professionals. Right? Something just a little bit different that makes people pay attention maybe a little bit more. So that's a comic triple. And then the rule of 9 is also called the rake bit, which basically is the idea that you can call things back 3 times and it'll be funny. So, if you say a joke, then you can maybe make a reference to that a second time and it'll be funny, and you do it a third time and it kind of completes a pattern. It feels good and people laugh. If you do it a 4th time, people are like, okay, I already got the joke. You've already said this. You should do it 5 times. It's all right, really, we get the point. 6 times you're starting to get upset with the person. 7 times you're like, this is ridiculous, I'm about to leave. 8 times it's I'm getting up from my seat. And the 9th time, for some reason, it becomes funny after 9 again, right? Or 10 or 11. And it's this idea that you're breaking expectations that you're going to keep on going, right? People are like, surely he's going to be done or she's going to be done with this thing by now. But the fact that you keep going makes people laugh. And so this comes from a Simpsons episode where Sideshow Bob rolls out from under the car. He takes a step and a rake hits him in the face, right? And then he takes another step and a rake hits him in the face. And another step, and he does it 9 times, and it becomes funny again after wow, how long is he going to step and get a rake hit in the face? Family Guy does this a lot with the chicken fights and a lot of jokes that they use. And so it's, again, breaking this expectation. And so that's another thing is that repetition a number of times can help to create humor.
And you weren't born funny. You talked earlier about the fact that you were in this improv troupe and you were awful. Where was the tipping point where you went from being I'm not funny, but I'm trying, to I might be kind of funny?
Well, it's kind of Do you play golf?
Badly.
Badly? Yeah. Well, so like at least golf for me is like you play golf for like you have the like 100 bad shots, but you play golf for like the 3 good shots that you have in a round.
Yeah, yeah.
Where like the 3 times where you feel like I'm getting the hang of this. And that's how comedy was for me when I first started, is like I would maybe do a bad show, but maybe I'd have 1 or 2 lines in an improv show that made me laugh. And then those 1 or 2 lines became, maybe I have like 5 or 7 lines, or maybe I have 1 to 2 lines in every single scene, right? And over time it became, so I don't think there's any kind of set point that has happened, because I've done over 1,000 shows, right? And there are shows that I do now that I'm like, oh my God, I crushed it, nailed it. And then there are still shows that I do where it's like, oh, got a lot of data that round because I failed a lot, right? And so it's an evolution, and it changes, but it certainly, I would say, after probably, I don't know, my very first show, I did get a laugh. And so that's what encouraged me to keep going. And I would say certainly after a couple of years of doing it, like I wanted to get to the point that I could be walking down the street and someone could be like, hey, we need you to do 10 minutes of stand-up. Can you fill that time? And I wanted to be comfortable doing that. And it took me probably 4 or 5 years of doing it, because otherwise I used to be like, no, I would need all the time in the world to plan out 10 minutes and all that kind of stuff. And now it's like, entertain this group of people for 10 minutes. I'd be able to like, all right, cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Nice. So if I'm an individual right now and I'm thinking I'd like to learn to be a bit more funny, where should I point them? Where should they go?
Well, like I said, just find the things that are funny around you. If they want to learn if they like the engineering approach, because some people like the approach of where it's like, no, let me just get out there and try it, which is fantastic. Some people like, wait, if you've already like decoded a lot of this stuff and I think in terms of that and I want to hear these shortcuts and stuff, then certainly they can find out. So my training company is humorthatworks.com, and there's a ton of like free resources there available on how to start to get into humor. There's an online course as well that people can take that learns more about these shortcuts. Like I said, in-person stuff is really, really valuable. So Googling like improv class in whatever city can be a great spot, or a stand-up open mic in whatever city can be a great way to do it. Even if you just go and watch an open mic, you'll learn a lot, because if you're used to seeing comedians that are very, very good, they make it look so easy and you're like, they're just talking on stage. Go to an open mic where they are not that polished and you start to see the work that goes into creating laughter.
Yeah, it's fun sat there watching somebody with a notepad on a stool that like has to keep referring back to it. Like, what am I supposed to say here again?
What did I want to talk about? All right. Why did I think this was funny?
Yeah, so it's all good stuff. And Drew, what about if like I'm a company, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is a thing, I want my people to laugh more. I want to embrace some of these things. I want less stress. I want more productivity. I want happier workforce. I want people to lead with more authority. And I'm wanting some of those things. Where would I point those people?
Yeah, so they can also find out. So on my website, it's divided by 2 things. There's 4 individuals, and that's where you're going to get resources as an individual person if you want to learn benefits. And then there's 4 organization. That's where we have a lot of workshops and programs. And the value of doing a program for a group of people at an organization is, 1, it provides team building, but it's not just like, let's go to a happy hour team building. It is like actually learn a valuable skill and actually get to know people a little bit better team building. But then it's also that piece of practice and repetition in a safe environment where they're learning these skills. And so from the organizational perspective, we do a lot of work on how do we use this to solve very specific challenges in the workplace. So it's not just let's just be funny for the sake of being funny, but how do we improve employee engagement using humor? And that's one program. Or how do we improve stress management using humor? And that's a different program. So that's the starting point. Or in general, for me, I do a lot of like larger events. That's andrewtarvin.com.
Gotcha. So I'm going to check your ability to improvise.
Yeah, great.
My final question. What's your favorite word and why?
Favorite word and why? So I would, 2 things come to mind immediately. The first one is more of a slightly jokey answer in the sense that milkshake.
Yeah.
Love the word milkshake because I love milkshakes themselves, because I love desserts, and milkshakes are the most efficient form of dessert. So I love milkshake as a word because of what it entails. And I would say engineer. Engineer is my favorite word in terms of what it creates. Those are two heady words. I'll give you one more that's like maybe just a good word. I love the word subtle
Okay.
because it has a B in it, but it's subtle, right? So the word itself is subtle versus my least favorite word is palindrome because palindrome is not in fact a palindrome.
You've spent time on these, right?
I've thought about this. Camouflage is a good word. It's got a hidden U. It's good. The letter Q, not a fan. Yeah, I've thought way too much. That's sometimes, it's similar to like what our buddy Ving says about magicians, is that sometimes magic is about willing to invest more time in a magic trick than anyone feels like is worthwhile. Sometimes that's what comedy is spending a lot, like is doing a thought exercise on one particular idea far longer than anyone else would. And you dive into like kind of the intricacies of it.
Milkshake, palindrome, subtle.
No, so milkshake, subtle, and engineer. Those are my three.
Okay, I never thought I'd get them in the same answer, but yeah, that's Andrew Tarvin
right,
for
they're
you.
all connected together, right?
Right.
You can see that.
What did I miss? What have I missed? What should I have asked you and didn't? What else did you want to share with anybody, or should we call it a wrap?
Well, I think what I would love to hear from you though is from your perspective, from having done a little bit of stand up now, but also certainly having been a speaker, and I would say a funny person, right? Because like I told you, one great shout out at your wedding, right? Hilarious, kind of off the cuff humor there that you had. Just in day-to-day conversations, you've made me laugh, and within your programs have made me laugh as well. I mean, what's your perspective on funny? Can people learn it? How did you learn? How have you made people laugh in the past?
Oh man, I didn't ask you a question expecting to get one thrown back in the other direction, but this is me teaching you that it's the questions that are the answers, right? What was the question again? How did I get started?
I would say two questions. How did you, one, become funny? Because I would say I would categorize you as funny, as a humorous person. And so answer that one first, and then I'll give you the second one.
I guess consciously when I learned how good a tool it was to be able to enhance the levels of communication. Particularly as a speaker and a trainer, what I could do is I could win friends far quicker with something that would make people laugh. So if my opening of a training was in some way triggering a laugh or getting a response back in the other direction, I knew that I could break down barriers when I would have to get uphill within a leadership position or when I was looking to win over somebody in my audience by making them laugh. It became this commonplace. So I would work to be able to achieve that, and I'd look to be able to present points with humor attached to them. So instead of me trying to say, how do I make something funny, it was, what's the point I'm looking to make, and can I make it funny? It's like, can I add some spice to it? So that would be, I guess, where I started to really put some emphasis on it. You met my dad actually at my wedding as well, so my dad's probably got to come into this in some ways. My dad would stand and speak at family functions, and I would see him try to be funny and sometimes fail miserably, but still understand the support and the kind of appreciation he would get from everybody in the audience, even though that sometimes he would miss by a country mile. And that was endearing to me. It was like, oh, good for you. And it became a giant challenge. My quest for wanting to be funnier, I guess, is similar to yours. It's I like puzzles. The reason I love sales is because I just think it's just this situation of unanswered questions. This, we need both sides of this equation to be able to equal each other. There's some missing pieces of algebra here that we need to be able to plug the gaps in to get everybody on the same side. And humor is the same thing to me. It's like, how do I figure this puzzle out? And from early days, even my exams, I called quizzes and puzzles. I just view this as another puzzle that I cannot solve. So the curiosity of me makes me want to chase it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great point. I mean, for me, I always, I didn't consider them math problems. I called them math opportunities. But I think it's very much a puzzle. And I think that speaks to one, I would say two things to kind of what you talked about is one, I think that sometimes people look at it and like, oh, well, if your family or if your dad or your mom or that kind of thing was funny, then maybe it's a genetic thing. Maybe it is something you're just born with. And I think it's a learned, observed behavior that sometimes the people that are funny because their family is just they've observed them do that. Like you said, you observed him in kind of speaking environments, try it and create a persona. or have a persona that was engaging. And I think that's another key is like, as you get more clear on kind of who you are in a stage and what your perspective is, writing and creating comedy becomes a lot easier. When I accepted that I am a nerd and that people see me as a nerd, and so part of my persona on stage is what is a nerd's viewpoint on the world? What is an engineer? How does an engineer look at all these different things? How do they look at emotion and communication and productivity and dating and all that other stuff? Like, I became a lot funnier and it became a lot easier to write because that became my persona or perspective. Certainly helps. And I think the other thing that is maybe probably true across most comedians is this idea of this curiosity, right? That you kind of spoke to, of like this puzzle, and I want to solve this puzzle. And I think there's curiosity in humor of like exploring, let me explore this topic a little bit more. Why is this the way it is? And let me ask what that question is and what the deal is about this. And what's the etymology of this word? Or why do we say this? Or why do we do this? And that can create humor because we do a deeper dive into it from a curious standpoint.
Ladies and gents, I hope you've enjoyed listening to my friend Andrew Tarvin talk about the word funny and milkshake drinking, subtle.
In a subtle engineering way.
I think that's enough for now. Take care, buddy. Catch you soon.
Yep. Thank you.